Hello, I am Horrorama, and today I have found 4 intriguing stories and experiences that multiple people have posted on various subreddits. But before we begin, I did want to ask you that if you end up enjoying my narrations, then please do consider liking and subscribing, as that really does help the channel a lot. And also, if you have any kind of experience or story that you would like to share and have it be narrated on this channel, then check out the subreddit in the description below. But either way, without any further ado, let's get into the narrations. The first story has been posted by user Clyde2003. The Frogman from Barney Hot Springs. There is a little hot springs nestled near the peak of the Peshimori Pass in central Idaho. Though it is hidden in plain sight, sitting quite literally on the shoulder of the road, it is not a well-known attraction outside of the valley. But the local ranchers are quite familiar with the Barney Hot Springs. It's not unusual to drive by on the weekends and see several families enjoying the water. Barney Hot Springs, or simply Barney's, is incredibly remote, even for Idaho standards. It's at least an hour of driving over rutty dirt roads, with a small town of Salmon to the north. If you need a hospital, it's over 2 hours to the regional hospital in Idaho Falls to the south. To say you're in the middle of nowhere at Barney's is an understatement. But the seclusion is one of Barney's major drawing points. That, and the odd abundance of tropical fish swimming in the year-round warm waters. You can sit back, relax, and take in the surrounding views of the mighty Rocky Mountains with little in the way of distraction. But Barney's isn't all it seems to be on the surface. An event 40 years ago turned this little hot spring from a local retreat to a local nightmare. On the afternoon of October 27th, 2 truckers stopped for fuel at my parents' gas station and cafe in Howey, Idaho. They were hauling a load of hay over the Peshimori Pass, headed for a delivery point somewhere in Utah. As the truck fueled, the 2 men settled down at the cafe counter and ordered coffees. Sipping his coffee, the older trucker struck up a conversation with my mother and the regulars in the cafe. He seemed a bit on edge, but was normal in comparison to his younger partner. That young man was clearly shaken and didn't say more than a quiet "yes ma'am" or "no ma'am" to my mom. He kept his attention on the cup of coffee he cradled in his shaking hands. As the older trucker and the others conversed, he brought up a peculiar event that had happened to them that afternoon. They had crested the Peshimori Pass and were coming down into the little lost valley. As they approached Barney Hot Springs, standing in the middle of the road was what looked to be a child. Bringing the truck to a stop, they soon realized, in horror and fascination, what was before them. It was not a child, but an odd, humanoid creature. Its body was slim, with long, slender limbs, and a squat little torso. The head and eyes were large and amphibian-like. It was not standing any taller than a preschooler. They could see its green skin shimmer in the brilliant midday sun, dripping with water. It was clutching a large bundle of what could only be described as hundreds of eggs. The creature watched the truck come to a stop, then awkwardly walked over the rest of the road and down an embankment. It was obvious from the trail of water it left behind that it had just come from Barney Hot Springs. On the other side of the road was a small stream hidden in dense willow bushes. No sooner had the creature disappeared, the two truckers were driving away as fast as their engines would take them. My mom and a few regulars at the cafe took in the man's story with a silent, somber expression and comforting head nods. This wasn't the first time strange things had been witnessed in the little lost valley. Of course, a frogman carrying his brood certainly was the most unique story they had heard in a long time. The regulars told the truckers not to get too worked up over the incident, as it could have been the autumn sun playing tricks on their eyes. The reassurance seemed to calm the men. They finished their coffees in a few quick gulps and headed out the door. My mom and the regulars had a good chuckle over the man's story and went on with their day. The following morning, on October 28th, one of the largest earthquakes ever recorded in Idaho struck the area. The Bora Peak earthquake was a magnitude 7.5 and could be felt hundreds of miles away. It destroyed farm infrastructure, roads and bridges. It even killed two children on their way to school when a brick building in Chalice, Idaho collapsed on top of them. It was a horrific and frightening day for everyone in Idaho. Barney Hot Springs was not far from the earthquake's epicenter and did not escape its wrath. A couple passing visitors near the springs that morning watched in amazement as the water drained into the earth, leaving behind a stinking, mucky hole. Minutes later, to their further astonishment, the water came splashing back into the depression, but was now boiling hot. It was a truly bizarre geologic event to see. The boiling stopped immediately after the earthquake ceased, and the water at Barney's quickly cooled. It's now more of a warm springs, having permanently lost about 15 degrees of temperature after the earthquake. The Frogman has been seen a handful of times since, always near Barney's and almost always standing in the road. I like to think the Frogman was just a doting parent getting their babies out of harm's way before the earthquake was struck and annihilated everything in the hot springs. Barney Hot Springs is still a wildly popular spot for the locals. No one seems to be too bothered by the idea of sharing the water with a little odd amphibian man and his family. Someone even reintroduced the tropical fish after the boiling incident killed all of them. It remains just one of the many weird stories to come out of the Lost Rivers area of Idaho. The next story is imposed by user Inevitable Popular 964. 3 men in the woods. The very first time I went to my boyfriend's family's house, we explored the very wooded areas around the house. 30 acres of land. Some hunters go in, but no hikers. Only old logging trails, which the original owner of the house probably created. A lot of the trails are not well maintained, with brush and logs over them. One area my boyfriend wanted to show me was the trail. I have always hated walking off trail. I hate bushwhacking and the sort. And this was in the spring, so there were definitely ticks. He brings me to a huge boulder he calls Dragon Mountain. It was a normal boulder, near a very small stream. He climbs up and then helps me up. It was much taller than me, but by no means gargantuan. We sit on the boulder, then lie down, looking up into the trees, talking. I am on the left, my boyfriend is on the right. I don't remember if we heard a crunching of leaves first, or saw them first, but to our east, three adult men, all wearing black or dark navy blue from head to toe in sunglasses, are walking towards the boulder carrying a large, long black tube. All three of them are carrying it together, and none of them are talking. They are just walking, carrying this thing. My boyfriend and I are extremely still. We did not get the urge to say hello or say anything at all to them, like we would normally to just normal people we encounter while hiking in the woods. These guys were walking towards us, but I don't think they could see us, because we are lying in this sort of large divot in the top of the boulder. We can hear the men walk behind where we are on the boulder. Then, when they are to our southwest, very close to the boulder, they stop completely. They don't talk, or actually, they didn't make any noise at all. Naturally, my boyfriend and I stay silent and still. We are just looking at each other, trying to take this in. It felt like a long time that they were there, making no noises. The men then walked around and then sort of just left. They went back in the same direction that they came from, still holding their black tube. We were very weirded out for a long time after this, and we got out of those woods pretty quickly in a direction away from them, opting to get to the road and follow that home instead of taking the quickest route towards the house, which was pretty much in their direction. We have both racked our brains for years about this, coming up with all kinds of explanations. My boyfriend later realized that the direction they came from is from a major highway, where there is a fence as well. We thought that they might have been hunters, with a black tube being a device to carry a deer maybe. But a lot of hunters live around there and tend to wear camouflage and orange. Not all black or navy or just dark colors in general. I get it, if they were hunting, they would likely be quiet, but they did make a fair amount of noise with their footsteps. Why did they stop? It just did not seem like three normal guys going through the woods doing whatever normal people do. I forget about this encounter periodically, but when I suddenly remember it, I cannot explain why I felt the way I did. Both of us had the instinct to hide and be silent. The next story is imposed by user tinfoil_tales. What's walking down the road? Someone suggested that I share my weird encounter. I know that fiction is allowed, but I assure you that my encounter is not that. I kind of wish it was, just so it would be easier for me to accept, but sadly that isn't the case. My encounter happened in February of 2007. I used to work third shift at a paper stock factory warehouse. The main day shift supervisor was on vacation, so our boss on night shift decided she wanted to leave early, so she let us sneak off about 2 hours earlier than our normal shift end time. So this would have been around 4:30 to 5 a.m. I was following a coworker down this country road, as the warehouse was on the outskirts of my small rural town. I noticed he hit his brakes and proceeded to swerve off the road. I'm probably 1,000 feet behind him, and I'm thinking to myself, what the heck is this dude doing? And that's when I saw it. There was a tall, dark shape strolling down the middle of the road in a hunched over and swaying side to side sort of manner. I have likened it to how one of those tall windblower figures you see swaying at a car dealership or something like that moved. Very unnatural movements. I can't do it justice by describing it, as it would only really make sense if someone saw it for themselves, just like I did. It looked like a tall person wrapped in a large dark blanket or cloak. I had to hit the brakes and swerve too, but I came to a full stop. Whatever it was, I couldn't make out any features or characteristics. I saw a large torso with 2 legs. The upper half was hunched towards, as if it was leaning forward, like an older person would with a walker. Now, at the time, I was driving a 1998 Ford Explorer, and I've looked up the height of the vehicle, and it lists it as around 67 inches. But whatever walked past my driver's window was a good foot or more higher than that, leaning forward. So I believe whatever was walking was over 7 feet tall, minimum. Again, I could not see a head, any arms, just a figure with legs walking. My taillights illuminated it as I started to drive past it. I couldn't make out any definite details for the body. I didn't see fur, skin, or anything like clothing. It was definitely solid, not like a translucent type of thing. It was just large, thick, and black, or at least very dark gray in color. My coworker had pulled over into a parking lot a little ways down the road, and I followed him in, and I could instantly tell that he was terrified. He was saying something along the lines of, "What was that? It didn't have a head," among a lot of other things most panicked people would say. We decided to drive back down and try to see if it's still there, and what it actually could have been. I drove in front, and he was following behind. We come up to the general area, and I notice there's a large black animal laying in the middle of the road. It appeared to be a big black dog. Part of me knew this wasn't large enough to be what was walking in the road, but we had to stop because it was directly in the middle of the roadway. I decided to get out and walk up to it, all the while my coworker is yelling at me to get back in my vehicle. As I approached whatever was laying in the road, it brings its head up and looks back at me. Its eyes were glowing yellow, which I write off as eye shine from the headlights, but it growls at me. So I stop dead in my tracks and just watch. This thing stands up on its back legs like a person, but falls back down. It sits back up and hobbles off to the side of the road like a wounded animal that wasn't able to use its front legs. It looked like your typical German Shepherd wolf type face, but its fur was puffy like a chow dog's. It was a lot bigger than most dogs, but still nowhere near as tall as whatever was walking down the road. I didn't see any blood or wounds, so I can't say if it was actually hurt or not. My coworker got out of the car by this point, after it had disappeared into the woods. We discussed what the heck had just happened, but while we were talking, I noticed next to our feet was a mouse. It was just standing there with us, but it was cleaning itself. I nudged it with my shoe, and it just kept cleaning its face, as if it wasn't afraid of us. The mouse was sitting in the upright position, as in it was on its hind legs, and using its front paws to wipe itself. I never really considered it until recently that all three of these bizarre happenings was all on two legs. We got back in vehicles and drove off, and then, the next time at work, I had mentioned what happened, and our coworkers just laughed at us. So the other guy who saw it told me if I don't stop talking about it, he's just going to deny it, and I best just forget about it. So for essentially 15 years, I never told anyone up until recently. I have tried to rationalize it into something that makes sense, but even then it doesn't completely add up. I have tried to explain it away as it was just a large dog that must have gotten hit by another vehicle before my coworker and I got there. Maybe it was just messing with the mouse and it got hit, which broke its front legs. So that's what it was trying to use as back legs. The mouse was, I don't know, traumatized from the dog trying to mess with it, so it was just standing there, cleaning the dog slobber off itself. That sounds at least plausible until the original thing we saw, walking without a damn head. The dog was nowhere near as tall as that thing was, so even with the dog standing upright, it was close to 6 foot roughly, but whatever was walking had to have been over 7 foot tall, as it was so much taller than my Explorer, even with it hunched forward. I can explain away the dog and the mouse, but I just can't explain what that thing was. So I'm back at square one, trying to understand what it could have possibly been. As someone who's always been very skeptical, it becomes very hard to accept the unacceptable. I have always been interested in weird creatures and such, but I never truly believed they existed. I still struggle to believe that all these crazy stories could be true. And yet, who am I to say they aren't? Especially with the weird crap that my former coworker and I went through that night. All I know is what I saw, but whatever I saw is something I don't know, and probably never will. It sounds crazy, and I personally would be hesitant to believe it if someone else told me this, but that's exactly what happened. The next story is posed by user Bridge703. Hello. So I've had a couple of encounters that have left me feeling crazy or just off. I live in central New York, which is where each of these happened. So several months ago, I'd say around February or March, I was at a park with one of my friends after dark. We had gone there frequently, and nothing had ever seemed weird. My friend was standing off to the side of a shed a few hundred feet away from me. I was sitting in my car. I had been zoned out, looking at stuff on my phone. He had been talking on the phone with someone. It wasn't until I heard this strange barking that didn't sound human or animal-like even. I couldn't figure out which direction it was coming from. The sounds seemed to be coming from every direction. I looked up and saw my friend quickly walking down the hill before coming to a dead stop mid-step. When I looked round, I saw out of my side view mirror something stand up from all fours from behind my car and sprint off at an honestly ridiculous speed into the surrounding woods. My friend came running to my car, getting in and locking the doors before saying, "Did you see that thing? It wasn't human. It looked like it, but it was way too tall and skinny. It had ran up behind your car, and then, when it was going behind your car, it squat down on all fours, then got up and ran off." The second encounter. This happened a few months after, right around the start of spring. I was with three of my friends and one of their dads. We were in the middle of the woods, at one of their campgrounds. They had gone off for a walk, roughly 20 to 30 minutes ago. I had stayed back to watch the fire. Suddenly, the world had gone dead silent. I almost felt like I wasn't even in this plane of existence anymore. It's really hard to explain. Then suddenly, I heard this woman screaming, "No, no, help! Someone help me!" I had just sat there, staring at the direction that I thought the noise was coming from, which was deeper into the woods. At first, I thought maybe it was one of my friends yelling, but none of them sound like that. Something had also been off about this voice. After a few minutes, it trailed off and got quieter as the world returned back to normal. My friends had returned after another 15 to 20 minutes from a different direction than I heard the voice. So yeah, if anyone knows what these encounters are or has had any similar experiences, do let me know. And with that, today's collections of narrations has concluded. But I will leave you with a final thought. No matter how much we might discover or learn, always remember that your truth is never the full truth. There is always another perspective that is just as indisputable as whatever you might believe, both in cases of the paranormal and the perfectly normal. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching.